It goes electric wavy when I turn it on. Off from my city, off from my home.
Little dance party on Tuesday. Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm Kelly Hilton and this is the amazing Sarah Landis. And thank you for tuning in. We're on HyperDoc Hangouts on air, Tuesday afternoon lunch break chit chat. And today we have the most amazing guest to introduce you to. Her name is the wonderful Nicole Beardsley. Hey, Nicole.
Hey, hi, everybody.
We're so glad that you're joining us today. You may have been following Nicole at Beardsley Teach, and she has been sharing some incredible work on social media, which is how we all met Nicole. And we just noticed that she was really making an impact with a lot of people. She's been presenting at Q conferences. She's been a rock star presenter. She's a TOSA. She's been teaching for 10 years. And she is going to bring her love of instructional digital lesson design and HyperDocs to us today. So thanks for being here.
Yay. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really excited.
So Nicole, tell us a little bit about your professional journey. When you started teaching and where you're at now, and maybe how you heard about HyperDocs and how that's kind of moved things along.
Well, like you said, I've been teaching for 10 years now and in a variety of different grades, mostly upper grades, 4th grade, 5th grade, middle school, English and social studies. And I think it was around when the shift to Common Core started to happen, where I really started to come into my own as a teacher. I was really into technology integration and kind of seeking out different teaching practices like that. And I jumped right into Common Core stuff. I've just always kind of had a desire to want to grow as a professional educator and give my students the best learning experiences possible. And then so when I moved to middle school, which was about almost 4 years ago, it was a whole new ball game for me. And I had a blank slate pretty much to kind of approach teaching in a totally different way, in a totally new environment. And then it was 2 years ago, I think, which is crazy to think it hasn't even been that long, but 2 years ago, I went to the Spring Q conference in Palm Springs, and Lisa, one of your co-creators, was one of the spotlight speakers there. And I went and checked her out, and it wasn't even about HyperDocs. It was just her session on using YouTube videos in the classroom, which I had been doing already. And in her session, she talked about this tool, HyperDocs, and she had some examples, and it just kind of set off a light bulb for me of these were all the things that I had been wanting to make my teaching look like. And I called it random acts of teaching. I would have a chunk of this here and a chunk of this there, but I couldn't quite synthesize it all together on my own until I saw her packaging it and presenting it. And I was just like, the light had been turned on. So I came back from that and I dove right in. I started taking things I was using in my classroom and modeling them after the examples that you ladies had shared and other pioneer teachers with HyperDocs had been sharing through Twitter and online and things like that. And then from there, I've just been kind of growing and sharing, and I really clinged on to the teachers give teachers mentality of sharing what we create and taking somebody's idea and remixing it, like adding a little bit to it or adding it to make it work for me. I feel like I've said this before. I feel like I like making HyperDocs to share almost more than I like using them in the classroom, because I like this idea of teachers supporting each other. So yeah, it's been a lot of growing, and it's exciting to be a part of something. I really see it catching on with a lot of teachers now. Everywhere I go, people are kind of hearing more about HyperDocs and trying them out at my school. A lot of teachers here are getting on board with trying them out. It's exciting.
That's so great. So Nicole, you, speaking of sharing on Teachers Give Teachers, one of my first introductions to you was when you tweeted out your how to HyperDoc for students. And we hadn't even thought about that yet. You basically made a HyperDoc for other teachers to teach their class how to learn in this new way. And I'm assuming that was motivated by an impact in your classroom. So can you talk to us a little bit about what you saw with your students and their learning experience and how that HyperDoc might have helped move that movement along in your classroom?
Sure. Yeah. I really like breaking things down to my students and to adult learners, really, to be honest, about the ins and outs of these tools that we're using. And I had this kind of epiphany that I'm going to be asking my students to kind of do this entirely new way of learning that maybe they hadn't been experiencing before. And I wanted to make sure that all the tools I was going to be throwing at them, they had at least some exposure to before, not in a content setting. So separate of trying to teach them the content in class, I wanted them to play around with things like clicking on links and typing on a Padlet, and just to kind of like to expose them to it. And also to kind of teach other people who are new to HyperDocs a way to kind of break it down for them. And if they wanted to share it, you know, in like a staff meeting. So it's kind of twofold for me.
Well, and really sharing is the ability of a teacher to scaffold content or learning opportunities for kids, which is exactly what this is. There's like multiple layers to what you're doing, right? And we know that as teachers, we're trying to break down our information all the time, but now you're able to do it in visually, you know, in a way that's like really presentable to the kids, and the ideas are truly broken down slide by slide. You know, there's so many different ways that you've done that. Kelly is sharing a little bit of that for people to kind of get a visual of what you mean. But I don't know, did you want to build off that experience?
Well, yeah, I was thinking too, along those lines, you also mentioned being an innovator as a teacher already. And I think teachers are always innovating, you know. Recently, I was thinking about HyperDocs and my own professional career as well, and relating to your story in the sense that I feel lucky that I had been teaching for 15 years in the classroom, and then I was introduced to Google Suite. So that was sort of like my foundation for being an instructor. That was the opportunity that I had with G Suite. So it's like opportunity met innovation, and all of a sudden we were able to go there with this. If I didn't know solid teaching pedagogy before, it would be really overwhelming, I think. So what you did with this is very helpful for a lot of teachers and for students. You also mentioned learning things in silos, like tools separately, which I made a lot of those similar mistakes as well, where I would just do like, okay, we're going to use technology now in this way. And then all of a sudden, when I thought about repackaging it and giving it to everyone from start to finish, it shifted the learning. So how did that look in your class? Do you have any stories about students or remembering of that shift, how that might have helped your learners?
Definitely. When I remember some of my earlier HyperDocs were probably more digital worksheets. Like I definitely started the process of going more paperless, so less copies, less worksheets, and using more of Google Docs and Google Classroom. And so the shift kind of started for me of starting there, going digital. And then it wasn't really until I did the HyperDoc Bootcamp online course and reading this guy, the HyperDoc handbook, really is when I learned about the lesson design from start to finish of what a HyperDoc actually is. And it's more than just a doc with links in it. And I know that's something that you ladies say all the time. And it's beyond that. It's the designing the lesson for students that have all those pieces embedded into it. That's just good pedagogy. Like, it has that engagement factor in it. It has the application piece built into it. And I started to kind of notice that as I was making HyperDocs, my thinking would be kind of in categories. It'd be, what do I want to teach? And what do I want them to do with it? And really for me, that was the biggest shift in turning a digital worksheet into a HyperDoc is, okay, I'm giving students all of these links to, you know, go read this or watch this video, but I didn't want it to stop there. I needed it to be, now, what do I want them to do with that knowledge? And then from there, I just kind of got better about differentiating and adding extensions that aren't just extra practice, you know, for kids who are at higher levels of learning. But it really kind of came down to digging deep into the pedagogy of a HyperDoc and studying in the boot camp course and in the handbook, that really helped me grow as a teacher outside of that just digital worksheet component.
I have to just say one thing. There's two things that are really standing out to me about what you're saying that I think so many teachers can relate to. And that is really like that journey where at first, maybe you're just learning how to use Google Drive and how to use like, you know, G Suite for what it really offers and just kind of the logistics of all that stuff. And then you start thinking, okay, now I want to create something for my students, but maybe it's just a digital worksheet. And then you're reflecting and thinking, okay, but now I'm ready to try my first hand at like bringing in more of the Four Seasons to my HyperDoc or whatever. Okay, now I'm ready to, and I feel like that process, that's that learning progression. Like so many teachers can relate to that. Like you can't just be maybe like awesome at something all the time, but there's these like little stages and steps that you go through. But the key that you're saying is just your own reflection on that. And so you've kind of created your own journey by saying, okay, that was great. Now what can I do? Now what can I do?
That's huge. Yeah. And the teachers that I work with in my role at my school now who are kind of getting started with HyperDocs, that's a message that I'm always sharing. Hi, Claudia, if you're watching. Claudia is a teacher I've been working with, and she's always like, oh, my HyperDoc isn't going to be as good as yours. And I'm constantly reinforcing to her, but it's okay because you're doing it. That's all it is you don't have to be amazing at it. What you need is that desire to make learning engaging for your students. And then the rest can be helped along the way, right? You'll learn and grow. It's just that initial spark of, I know where I want to go and I know what I want to do, and just jumping in. That's really the biggest part. And then the rest, you just get better with practice, like everything else.
Absolutely. So true. So Nicole, you also are known for your argument essay roadmap, HyperDoc. And I'm going to pull that up here really quick because you were talking about like taking all the parts of the lesson and putting it together. And I was kind of curious. I was wondering like if you were using Google Classroom to push those lessons out before or some other method. And if putting it all together in this way, how that might have cleaned up your streamline in Google Classroom, or what it was like teaching from this HyperDoc here.
Yeah, so this kind of came from a conversation with my team about taking HyperDocs and removing the kind of sage on the stage teaching practice. We were teaching how to write an essay to our 6th graders, and it was kind of a reflection of, it's a lot of direct instruction that really my whole class probably didn't need. And I was missing out on opportunities to really work one-on-one with students who really could have used that help if I was just doing a whole class instruction model. So my team at the time, we were dabbling in HyperDocs, and I was kind of being persistent in wanting to really make this argument essay unit blended instruction model using this kind of self-paced kind of HyperDoc idea. And it was collaborative because students were working together with their partners, but it was self-paced. So we made this roadmap idea that I got a template from another teacher who shared it online, and I was like, we could totally do this. And so we made the instructional videos. It's just screencasting me talking, which is funny because now it's got like so many tons of views on it. If people want it, like, oh, I saw your video on YouTube.
Your voice, right? So you personalize the instruction for them. So
it's really taking the classroom. Yeah, what I would have taught in front of my students once, I taught it speaking to my computer and then put it on YouTube. And then my kids were working on it and could go back and access that video as many times as they needed. For me, that was a big shift in teaching, is that teaching only happens once and then it's gone. And if the kid's absent that day or if they need to see it again, we started to kind of have those conversations. And then the idea of it's all in a one-stop shop. You know, if they were ready to go on to writing their conclusion paragraph, then it wasn't me holding them back because the rest of the class wasn't there yet. So it was a different kind of approach to making a HyperDoc because it was a unit in a whole. And then I kind of used it to teach off of with the kids I was sitting with and who needed a lot of support in how to write an essay. I could have the resources were there. So I would sit and I'd watch that instructional video with them. And it was just kind of weird. I would pause myself and comment on myself. But it was a really good experience. And we noticed it was true differentiation. Whereas before, when we're teaching whole class and I'm standing up in the front, I don't know what learning is happening. I don't know the kids who really need to hear the things I was saying maybe weren't hearing it. But if I was sitting at a table with the 6 of them, then I could be certain about it. So it was really cool. And then I put it out into the world because I was like, well, why keep this to myself? We put a lot of work into it, and I know that other teachers could benefit from it probably, or take it and make it even better. So I did, and I've been getting lots. I still almost regularly get comments or view notifications on some stuff that's in there.
That feels good, right?
I have to say too, what you're really describing is this interesting phenomenon that happens when you teach with technology. It seems like in one case, it seems odd to put a child in front of a computer and say, okay, just go. But then at the same time, what it really is doing is giving you more face time with students and more structured face time, more small group time, which, teachers have so many students in their classrooms. If you're elementary, you've got, 30 kids. If you're secondary, you're cycling through a new set of kids all the time that we never feel like we have face time. And so as weird as it sounds to put a child in front of a laptop to work through a HyperDoc, it frees you. And you're essentially multiplying yourself. Making that video has allowed you to multiply yourself, especially when you get questions on the same questions year after year. It's like we don't have to make a video for everything, but if there's going to be
hurdles,
some things like your content, it's always hard for kids. Like, let me video that instead of everything. So it's really speaking to that. And I have to say, we've got this incredible question, if you don't mind interrupting. You kind of led to that, how you were willing to share your work and how teachers are using it. We have a great question from Lori Guion, who she's also taken our course and is doing some incredible work out there like you are. But she said that time is the biggest hurdle that she hears from teachers all the time. And if you have any suggestions or shortcuts that you would offer teachers just to kind of tackle that time issue. What made me think of it is that you said you put your work out there. So one suggestion to Lori and to others who are listening is to take advantage of what's already out there, to get in the habit of remixing other HyperDocs so that you don't have to start from scratch all the time, because it can be time consuming to create these lessons. So,
so what did you do though, Nicole? Because you emailed us too a few months ago about feeling good about some of the movement happening at the site that you're working at. So what was your strategy for that?
Yeah, that's time, the gift of time, right? That's something like we never have enough of. And definitely using what's out there first. I pretty much never start a HyperDoc from total blank slide, blank doc scratch. Almost never. I think it's always started from like a template I liked, or I saw somebody's HyperDoc and I liked the flow of it, so I would make a copy of it. I make copies of things as I find them and store them in a folder in my Google Drive, and I just titled it Inspos as kind of like a bulletin board. So I don't need this right now, but but I'll come back to it later. All my earlier HyperDocs were all driven by what I was going to be teaching in class pretty much in the coming week. So I just kind of dug my heels in and made it happen. Sometimes it was sitting on my couch at 9 o'clock at night after my kids had gone to bed. And I kind of get into the zone too, like an artist who's like painting. I guess I've never been an artistic person, but I guess that's the closest I'll come, where it's the creative process, right? And it's something that I'm creating and I want it to be good. And so I ignore other responsibilities to make it happen because I really want it to be that good. So I think starting with a template is the best way. And I use Twitter like a search engine. Like I go on Twitter and I just type whatever HyperDoc and I just kind of scroll through and see what comes up. And that was a good start for me. And that's kind of what I encourage other people to do too, as they are building their own HyperDocs. And the second thing is just the commitment is really kind of where a lot of my drive comes from, because I believe so much in it and I want my instruction to be good. So I invest the time. I know that's not helpful because there is no extra time to add in the day, but I just make it happen. I make it happen. I ignore other things and make it happen, like a sink full of dirty dishes.
Well, one thing, yeah, dishes are one, or sometimes HyperDocs have been described as the rabbit hole, where, you know, that could be you potentially like, hey, I'm going over here, and there's your family going, hey, are we going out to dinner, or are we finishing a HyperDoc tonight?
I think too, one of the things that might also be helpful is collaborating on one. Like we have a couple HyperDoc creators across the country who have partnered up to
Well, she did with
do
this
different,
one.
yes, like your novel one. You'll probably speak to that. But when I think about saving time, I also think about partnering with other HyperDoc creators or teachers who are teaching the same content and they know they want to create one, but they just haven't gotten there yet. So we're going to be working on a couple coming up. And so we'll do different parts and bring it together. So that's another way to think of it, as like only doing one section or one part and letting your colleagues or people across the country do the other part.
Yeah, I would also add to that when we all started teaching, I'm sure you remember going through a credentialing program where, I don't know, for myself, I had to follow the lesson design format and write down materials and think through every step of the process, you know, my engagement activity and or my hook, or, you know, what I was going to do, where I might build in differentiation, where I might build in collaboration. And slowly I got into the classroom and that totally like went out the window, writing it out that way. But in my head, I knew I started to like become my own designer of the lessons, and that pedagogy stuck with me anyways, even though I wasn't writing it out. So when the process of creating a HyperDoc, if you're getting new to the tools, does seem a little bit daunting. But once you have that pedagogy in your head too, it's seriously just like sitting down and writing a lesson plan. There's no need to like jot it down your sections of your day anymore. Like your HyperDoc on the argumentative essay, you thought through that entire unit. You've taught it before. It's there. The next year you can, revise it with a few tweaks as the curriculum gets updated. But it's done for you, and you're still bringing in that art of teaching. So.
Yeah, and approaching it, like I said before, with that, what do I want to teach, and what do I want kids to do with it? It's like almost it becomes kind of formulaic after a while. And like you said, the pedagogy it's still good teaching. It's just using this tool that kind of makes it a little more convenient. But it's the mindset of a HyperDoc that really makes the difference in the design. And then, yeah, experience is good. And if you were in a grade level that you've taught before, that's definitely an advantage. But it's just like any other lesson. Every year you teach it, you get a little better at it, or you find cool resources to add into it. The thing about HyperDocs is just that it puts it all into one spot, one place, instead of I have a worksheet for this or a poster for that or a video for this. It's just taking everything and streamlining it. And over the last couple years, since I started doing HyperDocs, I've been kind of doing that, like dumping all my file folders of stuff, because digital content is updated way more than my filing cabinet things were. And as I come across things that I think are awesome, like a video or an article or something, I just kind of save them. I store them away on like either a YouTube playlist or a Pinterest board or something, so that when I'm there, and they're kind of stored for me. So
that's awesome. You just gave me an idea. Hashtag ditch that file cabinet. That's what HyperDoc is. Talk to Matt Miller about getting on the ditch.
I call it teacher minimalism. I want to make a conference session on the art of tidying up, only the teacher edition, and ditch that file cabinet.
Yeah, that's what HyperDocs do. You don't need it anymore.
We get so many moms, we spend,
Well, and I've been teaching long enough where it really was little file folders of all the possibilities. And when you took over someone's classroom, you would get theirs too. And you would spend the time looking through theirs and deciding what you really wanted to teach. And that's the same process with designing HyperDocs. Really, it's just digitally. So I do want you to maybe share with us a little bit about your PACS novel study. Can you tell us about that process and that HyperDoc?
Yeah, this whole process was awesome. So the original HyperDoc for the novel PACS I made with 3 other teachers who I'd never met in person. It was Heather Marshall and Kimberly McDonald and Jen Diaz. And it just came through a message on Twitter, I think started by Heather, who makes amazing novel HyperDocs already. But she said making a novel HyperDoc, a HyperDoc that you're going to use for an entire novel, is so time consuming for just one person to make. And she was wanting to kind of collaborate. And it was over the summer, and I was like, yeah, I'm on board. So the 4 of us worked on making this HyperDoc, and it was for the Global Read Aloud, which for 2 years ago now. So we made it for that, and it was fantastic. And then what I did from there was I took the HyperDoc we made and I remixed it. So I remixed myself pretty much.
Right.
And so I made it to be taught as an in-class novel study. And so I took a lot of the components that Heather and Kimberly and Jen and I had put in and made a HyperDoc that was more standalone and took out the Global Read Aloud piece. And then this actually ended up being used when I was on maternity leave, which was amazing because it was 6 weeks of sub-plans right there. And I taught 6th grade English, so I didn't have to do anything. And it was awesome. So HyperDocs as sub-plans, I mean, really, it'll change your life as soon as you do that. But yeah, this was all like a novel study in class. It was all things, I would post the assignment in Google Classroom for the day. My kids were in collaborative teams. They did the reading part was a read aloud. So the teacher would read the section for the day, and then I just kind of pasted out. And then that slide deck was kind of just like a reference. And every day they would go to the slide deck and it would have their task for the day. And then the assignment itself was in Google Classroom. So for that one, I learned a lot about workflow in a novel HyperDoc. And Heather taught me a lot about that too, about when you have your kids working on a HyperDoc like that, you don't want to be searching through 35 slide decks to see their responses for a question. So building in things like Google Forms as like a quick response if you just want to do a little assessment of their learning, or using Google Classroom for separate assignments or things you actually want to be checking on. But more of the learning process of using HyperDocs efficiently and to inform, like that formative assessment piece built in there. And then, yeah, it was all in one. It took a long time to put together, but that's like a 6-week unit right there, and it's done. And I can just add to it here and there and tweak it as I go, but it's there.
You've mentioned about how you are on maternity leave, which is an incredible benefit to HyperDocs. And I don't think you even skipped a beat. You had a baby and you were like still interacting on Twitter. You're amazing. I want to know like the true confession. Were you peeking at your students' work as well when you're at home on maternity leave and giving feedback, or letting the son do that?
I was like almost 2 weeks overdue. So in those first 2 weeks, I was so bored. I was definitely kind of spying on them. And then I forced myself to kind of disconnect. Yeah, because it can be kind of painful sometimes too when you're logging in and why aren't they on that? What's the pacing? What's going on here? I had to I forced myself to disconnect. Yeah. But I was still on Twitter. I was having serious FOMO when I was scrolling through Twitter on maternity leave and checking out cool stuff that was going on. Yeah.
Okay, so we have a little bit more time, and I would love for you to share with us your latest addition to your collection, which is more for professional learning. Can you tell us about the PLC data interaction HyperDoc?
Yes. So this is my first year out of the classroom in a TOSA role, and I have kind of embarked on this journey of HyperDocs for adult learners now, and I work with teachers a lot more. And I was just kind of thinking, like, we had this data that at the start of the year, my principal wanted our professional learning community teams to look at. It was our SBAC data, basically. And I was just thinking how many times, you know, you get a packet of test data just kind of flop down in front of you in a meeting with your team, and you have to kind of spend some time digesting it and responding to it. And then I just kind of thought I would like to put that into a HyperDoc, and that teachers deserve organized thinking too. So what I did was, with this HyperDoc, everything that's in the Explore side, I just linked to the online data, basically, of our various subgroups and things that my principal wanted our teams to be looking at. And then we just kind of built in discussion questions and a place for teachers to capture their thinking and their responding. And it felt really good. It felt like intentional conversations that were able to be captured too. So my principal, like a classroom teacher, can't get to every single team during this time, but still she maybe wants to hear snippets of their conversation. So through having a HyperDoc, they could have a representative on their team kind of capturing the thinking on there, or individual teachers too. So it was a good way for her to kind of see that. But also, like I said, it just feels a little bit more engaging and purposeful when it was designed that way, instead of, like I said, putting the packet of data down in the middle of the group and then having a discussion. So I really, in this new chapter of my career, HyperDocs for adult learners and making PD more engaging and interactive for teachers. Teachers deserve way better than what we've been getting for years and years in the professional development delivery category. So that's my current focus, is taking these conversations that we have as teachers and making it just more interactive and more engaging.
That's awesome. Yeah.
That was my first venture with it. So
yeah, we've seen a lot of, I think it's amazing. If I were an administrator, I'd be really happy, because you just multiplied yourself and then facilitated the conversation and kept it focused on students. And if you see things like patterns, you can go back and now you have the conversation with teams of teachers too, to build off that. So it's very powerful.
I think too, what comes to mind for me is just, we as educators, we have these have-tos, like things that we have to do, which is like look at data. And these are things that our district asks us to do, our site leadership, we have to do those things. But what you're kind of doing is remixing that into a want to. Like, okay, it feels like a little bit more engaging for me as a teacher to do one of these things that I have to do, look at data. So now you've kind of created a scenario where I'm like, okay, I kind of want to do this. Like, let's click here and you go to the math and I'll do the ELA, and then let's gather our information and our noticings. And you have a protocol and like a structure to it that keeps it fair, consistent, and a little bit more engaging. And I think that's hugely important, because teachers feel so often like their time isn't valued. And so we want to all appreciate you. And there's even a cute comment on here from, I believe it's Carrie Sloan, who says, thanks for thinking of the teachers. You know, so
it's true, because we spend a lot of time talking about making learning engaging for our students, and then we go sit in these staff meetings that can suck the soul out of you. Sorry, I don't want to offend anybody, but but it's true. Teachers deserve better, and you, like you said, Sarah, like those things we have to do that are important. Making them just a little bit more organized, I think too. Like, we spend so much time just kind of figuring out what we're supposed to be looking at sometimes. So whatever role like the TOSA or the coach or the administrator can do to kind of get teachers, make their time valuable and make it more efficient, I think that I'm all for that. And that's kind of my something I've tasked myself with in my TOSA role now.
Well, can't wait to see more of what you designed, because, you know, there's two more layers I don't think we've touched on yet. One is you're introducing teachers to HyperDocs and they're experiencing it, and they can potentially see how to use that in their classroom, even if it is kind of like a digital worksheet in the beginning. It's an entry point. And the second is equity of voice. A lot of us have sat in staff meetings or in grade level collaboration meetings or department meetings where it feels like not everyone's being heard, or what their findings is not being captured authentically. So when it's all there in that digital space, you're really creating equity within your staff as well. So
absolutely, that's a huge point, and that's something that we talk about a lot here at my site too, is equity of voice. Just like you would in your classroom, where you want to make sure all student voices are heard. At a school, sometimes you don't want the 5 loudest voices in the room to feel like they're speaking on behalf of everybody, and you also want to know what teachers are noticing and what thoughts teachers have, because they may not be the teachers who are sharing out in staff meetings. So absolutely, I completely agree with that.
A question here from Ryan's World. That's just wondering if that particular one you just shared was intended for individual teachers, or like actually to sit down as a team, like with a blend of both.
Yeah, so that data interaction one was intended for a team to look at. So at our school, in our PLC process we're rolling out this year, like an entire team sat down together. So like our 7th grade English team sat down together, and our 8th grade math team sat down together. So they were all looking at the same data technically, but they were just looking at it in their individual teams. And then the questions, I think I tried to design to make them applicable to their content area, but I also had them looking at other content data as well, because, you know, like even though you're an English teacher, you still want to know where your students are at with their math scores. So small group analysis of the same data, instead of sitting in a staff meeting and all 40 of us are looking up at a screen and having small conversations at our table.
Yeah. One of the things that you're making me think of, and it's getting a big response on the chat as well, is this table, this like protocol basically that you've established in this HyperDoc. And I know we've been thinking like, are there any new templates we need to put together and really push out, because these are the types of things that all schools are having to do in one way or another. And so potentially like a data analysis template or HyperDoc that could be used as a professional development is something you've got me thinking right now. Like maybe we need to package it up, as, you know, and just say, hey, here's 2 or 3 data analysis protocols. Because I know our templates have really been successful, and I think everyone does need a starting point, and we're all kind of trying to do the same things. And so, so potentially this could be incredibly valuable to site leadership and to teachers, putting around something that schools are doing. So,
yeah.
This could be good. I like it.
Yeah,
getting
totally.
excited.
Yeah.
Well, like you said, it values teachers' time, because it's showing the purpose, right? Just like I said before with my students, like what do I want to teach them and what do I want them to do with it? Teachers deserve the same thing, right? So see value in, why are you having me look at this data, and then building it in, and like you said, multiplying yourself. So instead of having to do it where there's just one person presenting and trying to force it, if it's a conversation, an organic conversation the team can have based on this packaging of how you structure the questions and the organization of everything being easily accessible, I think it could really make a huge difference in how we do professional development and looking at data as professional educators too. Yeah.
Right. And beyond, and that way we can see students too for beyond the data. We can get to the heart of what we're really trying to do, you know, and be like purposeful. Like we're purposeful with our lesson design, but we're also purposeful with our conversations about kids, which is really the heart of why we're looking at the data, to make an impact on their lives. So this has been really amazing. Thank you, Nicole. You've been for everything, for sharing on social media, for your insights today, for your pioneering, and for your leadership. Sarah and I feel honored to have this opportunity to live in the digital world where we can chat with people at lunchtime and have cross-district conversations. You're not that far away from us, so we've met you face-to-face. Maybe we can continue these conversations. And we'll be thinking of you on Sunday during the Super Bowl when Justin Timberlake is performing, because we do know a little fun fact about Nicole. She's a big Justin fan, JT all the way. And I think I would agree with her. So that's why we had her little
Justin Timberlake concert on Sunday, and then a football game is interrupting it.
Oh, really? There you go. Exactly. Yeah. Well, we all know for some years the Super Bowl is really just about that halftime. Anyways,
For some of
Commercials.
us.
depending on who's playing or how good the
But
game
I'll be
is.
watching this year since he's on.
So yeah, maybe we'll be tweeting you on Sunday, giving a little shout outs as a JT fan.
I will say my 22-month-old was rocking out to him this morning in the car.
Yes.
Totally gets
Maybe I'll HyperDoc it. I'll make a HyperDoc for the.
Oh my God, I know you start thinking like that in your life, right? I know. Totally. But you're amazing. Thank you. If people still have questions, go ahead and keep adding them. All of Nicole's resources are linked in the YouTube channel. Sarah and I will be back here next week with another special guest who is in the chat right now, Mr. Steve Wick. So we cannot wait to have another Hangouts on air next Tuesday at lunchtime with Steve. So shout out to Steve. And thanks again. We'll see everybody next week. Stay curious. What's next?
Persevere
and reflect. That's
CPR.
CPR. That's what our hyperdoctors do. Okay, have a great week, everyone. Bye.